My dear friend, there is a teaching from Jesus that at first glance seems heavy, yet it holds a strange intimacy and love. The cup that I drink, you will also drink. The baptism that I endure, you will also endure. That whisper is not a threat, but an invitation into the deepest communion with Him. The cup Jesus speaks of is not a cup of joyous celebration, but the bitter cup of sacrifice, of trials and suffering for the sake of truth. That baptism is not just a ritual in water, but a complete immersion into the way of the Master, the way of the cross. When He invites us to drink from this cup together, Jesus does not want us to suffer alone. On the contrary, He wants to share His very life with us. He wants to say that on all the most rugged paths of life, He has gone before us and is walking alongside us. Is there any sorrow of ours that He has not tasted? Are there any tears of ours that He has not shed? To endure the same baptism with the Lord is a commitment to follow Him to the end, to die to the old sinful self and be reborn into a new life, a life of grace. The path of following the Lord is not always easy, but it is precisely in courageously drinking the bitter cup and being immersed with Him that we truly become like Him and share in His glorious resurrection. For the path of a disciple is the path of sharing in the passion to then share in the glory with their Master. As St. Paul affirmed, if we suffer with Him, we shall also be glorified with Him. Therefore, Jesus' invitation, though tinged with the color of renunciation, promises an immortal glory. Today's bitter cup will become tomorrow's joyous wine in the kingdom of heaven, where we will be with Him forever. Continuing these reflections, let us delve deeper into the landscape of the soul, where Jesus' invitation is not just a doctrine, but has taken root and grown into an ancient tree of wisdom, radiating countless vibrant philosophies for life. His words are like seeds sown into the soil of time. Through every rain of trial, through every ray of grace, they sprout into priceless lessons. Below are the philosophical roots nourished by that very invitation to communion. Before we begin, we kindly invite you to take a moment to subscribe to our channel to help spread this valuable content to your family and friends. We thank you, and now we invite you to listen. 1. True love and sacrifice are two sides of the same coin. Love is not a superficial emotion, but a voluntary act of giving. Where there is love, there is a readiness to give, even to the point of personal loss. The cup of Jesus is a cup of love filled with infinite sacrifice. One afternoon, while walking along the shore of the Sea of Galilee, Peter saw a mother bird feeding its young. He said, "Master, the way it cares for its young is truly wonderful." Jesus smiled and replied, "Peter, do you see how it must chew the food to pieces so its chicks can swallow? Its love is shown through that action. The cup I am about to drink is the same. It is the love of the Father in heaven crushed so that humanity can receive it and have life. 2. Trials are not a punishment but a forge for the soul. No precious sword is made without passing through red-hot fire and the blacksmith's hammer. Similarly, a great soul and a strong faith cannot be formed from ease, but must go through hardship and trials. Drinking the bitter cup is that very tempering process. In a village in Nazareth, Jesus stopped before the forge of a man named Daniel. The sound of the hammer striking red-hot steel rang out sharply. Wiping his sweat, Daniel said, "Rabbi, it must be heated intensely and struck forcefully to become a good plowshare." Jesus nodded and said to the disciples standing by, "The human soul is like this piece of iron. The trials the Father allows are the fire and the hammer. Do not be afraid, for it is through them that you become sharp and useful for the kingdom of heaven." 3. True authority comes not from ruling, but from serving and sharing in suffering. The world seeks power to be served by others, but in the kingdom of heaven, the greatest leader is the one who dares to drink the bitter cup with his flock, who dares to stoop down to wash the feet of his brethren. When James and John asked to sit at his left and right in his kingdom, Jesus looked at them and the others who were jealous and said gently, "You do not know what you are asking. The throne you imagine is made of wood and silver. But my throne is built from a cross. The cup of glory you dream of is actually a cup of bitter vinegar. Whoever wishes to be great among you must be your servant. Whoever truly wants to sit near me, be ready to share this bitter cup with me." 4. The deepest empathy is born from shared scars. You cannot truly understand a person's pain until you have experienced similar pain. Jesus, by drinking the bitter cup to the dregs, entered into the extremity of human suffering so that from there he could comfort us with absolute empathy. A woman named Miriam was sobbing by the roadside because her only son had just died. Many passed by and offered condolences, but to no avail. Jesus came, sat down beside her, and was silent. After a moment, he said softly, "I understand your pain of loss. The day will come when I, too, will drink a cup even more bitter than this, so that every tear like yours may be wiped away." She looked up, feeling for the first time that someone had truly touched her pain. 5. The strength of a community is forged in sharing both joys and sorrows. The journey of faith is not a solitary path. The strength of the disciples lies not in individual talents, but in the unity of striving for a common goal, sharing a common mission, and drinking from the same bitter cup. Once, when their boat was caught in a storm, the disciples panicked and began to blame one another. Jesus stood up and looked at them in silence. When the storm calmed, he said, "The storm out there is not as frightening as the storm in your hearts. When you bail water together, the boat is steady, but when you argue, it will sink. The cup I give you is not for each to drink alone, but to pass from hand to hand, so that one may become the strength for another." 6. Joy is more complete when it sprouts from the seed of suffering. The light of dawn is only truly brilliant to those who have passed through a long, dark night. The resurrection only holds great meaning because it follows the passion. True joy is not the absence of sorrow, but the ability to overcome it. Andrew looked at the barren fields after winter and sighed, "Master, they look so lifeless." Jesus picked up a dry kernel of wheat in his palm and said, "Andrew, look. If this kernel is not willing to be buried in the dark earth and decay, it will remain alone. But if it accepts to die, it will produce a stalk full of grain. Sorrow is like the soil and joy is the harvest. The bitter cup I am about to drink is for the sake of an eternal harvest." 7. True freedom is when we are no longer enslaved by the fear of suffering. Humans are often imprisoned by fear, fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of suffering itself. Willingly accepting the bitter cup from the Lord's hand is an act that liberates us from these fears because we know that no trial can separate us from His love. A tax collector named Jonathan wanted to follow Jesus, but he was afraid of retaliation from the Romans and ostracism from his own people. He came to Jesus at night and confessed his fear. Jesus said, "Jonathan, you fear the cage, but you are already in it. Fear is that cage. When you dare to drink the cup that I drink, you do not break the cage. You realize the cage has no door. You can walk out at any time because the love of God is greater than any fear." 8. The meaning of life is found not in avoidance, but in embracing one's mission. Everyone is born with a destined cup, a unique mission. Life is only truly fulfilled when we courageously accept and drink that cup to the last drop, no matter how bitter, knowing that it is the path that leads to glory. Thomas asked Jesus, "Master, why must we take this difficult path? Why not choose a peaceful place to preach?" Jesus pointed to an old olive tree on the hillside and said, "Thomas, look. It stands here, not shying away from the harsh sun or the strong winds. Its roots cling deep into the rocky soil. That is why it produces the most precious oil. Your mission is the same. Do not avoid your cup. Root yourselves deeply in it, and your lives will bear fruit. 9. Hope is not the illusion that there will be no storms, but the conviction that God is always with us in the storm. Drinking the bitter cup does not mean God will take away all difficulties. It means He will give us the strength to overcome them. Hope is not seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, but believing that an unseen light is with us in the darkness. That night on the lake, a storm arose. The disciples were terrified, but Jesus was asleep. They woke him crying, "Master, we're going to die." He awoke, calmed the sea, and then asked, "Where is your faith? Did you think I invited you onto this boat only to let you drown? This storm is also part of the cup we drink together. What matters is not that the boat doesn't rock, but that I am always on the boat with you." 10. The cross is not an endpoint, but a bridge. Ultimately, this is the greatest philosophy. The bitter cup and the baptism of suffering are not the final destination. They are the path, the necessary bridge that Jesus crossed to connect the gap between God and man, between death and eternal life. Before his final journey to Jerusalem, Jesus stood with his disciples, looking down at a deep chasm separating two hills. He said, "Sin created a chasm like this between humanity and the Father in heaven. No one can cross it on their own. The cup I am about to drink, the body I am about to offer, will become the bridge across that chasm. You and all of humanity after you will be able to return to the Father because of that bridge." Before we continue with today's journey of discovery, we would greatly appreciate it if you could take a moment to leave a comment and share your feelings. If you found this content valuable, please don't forget to hit the share button to spread these positive vibes to your friends and family. And now, let's get back to the program. 11. Humility is the first fruit that grows from the soil of trial. The bitter cup has a most powerful purifying effect. It washes away the dust of pride. Only when faced with their own limitations and powerlessness do people learn to bow down, realizing their need for God and for others. Greatness begins when the ego shrinks. One day, Jesus and his disciples passed a scribe who was eloquently expounding the scriptures on a street corner, attracting a large crowd. The scribe held his head high, full of pride in his knowledge. Jesus said nothing, merely leading his disciples to a courtyard where a child was struggling to pour water into a broken jar. He said, "That scribe's soul is like a full jar, unable to receive anything more. But a humble soul is like this broken jar. Though imperfect, it is always open to receive. The cup I drink is a cup of self-emptying, so that through it the Father's power may be poured in." 12. Accepting God's will is not surrender, but cooperation. To drink the cup the Father gives is not a passive act of resigning to fate. It is an active choice, a yes full of trust, through which we allow God to carry out his great plan through our small lives. In the Garden of Gethsemane, while the disciples slept, Jesus prayed until he sweated blood. Had an angel appeared and asked, "Master, do you truly want this? You can stop." Jesus, even in his agony, would have looked up and replied, "This is not what I want, but it is what I choose. I choose the Father's will because I know his path, though painful, is the only path that leads to life. This cup is not an imposed destiny, but a covenant of love that I voluntarily embrace." 13. The memory of blessings received is the strength to drink the present bitter cup. In the most difficult times, the human mind is easily clouded by the darkness of the present. But faith invites us to look back on our journey, to remember the countless times God has provided, and from that to gain courage to face the trial before us. When the disciples worried about not having enough bread for the crowd, Jesus asked them, "Do you not remember the miracle of the 5 loaves and 2 fish? Do you not remember how the Father fed his people in the desert for 40 years? The bitter cup before you may seem daunting, but never forget the sweetness of the countless cups of grace the Father has given you. Let the memory of His mercy be your provision for the present. 14. Every tear shed in faith is a seed for future joy. God never wastes any of the pain of His children. Every tear, every silent prayer in the dark of night, every hidden sacrifice is cherished by Him and transformed into fruits of grace for ourselves and for others. A farmer named Samuel lamented to Jesus, "Rabbi, the drought is terrible this year. The land is parched, and I fear there will be no harvest." Jesus picked up a handful of dry soil and said, "My friend, you see only the dryness, but the Father in heaven sees the morning dew that the naked eye cannot. He also sees the drops of your sweat falling to the ground. Do not worry, no drop of water that falls on this land is in vain. Likewise, no tear in your cup of suffering is forgotten in His sight. They will water a harvest you cannot yet imagine." 15. To drink a bitter cup without forgiveness is like drinking poison. External trials are bitter enough, but internal resentment is even more so. Forgiveness is the act of freeing oneself from the chains of the past, allowing us to drink the bitter cup without being poisoned by hatred. A man named Matthew came to Jesus and said, "Master, my neighbor cheated me. I have been wronged. I cannot forget it." Jesus replied, "Matthew, the Father in heaven gives you a bitter medicine to heal your soul. But your resentment is a poison you add to it yourself. Pour out that poison. My cup too is full of betrayal and injustice, but I will drink it with a prayer of forgiveness, so that it becomes a cup of salvation, not a cup of destruction." 16. True maturity is the ability to see God's hand even in things that go against our wishes. When things go smoothly, it is easy to thank God, but only mature souls can recognize His presence and loving plan even when doors slam shut, when dreams are shattered. That is when faith is tested by fire. Philip eagerly told Jesus about his plan to preach in a large city, but when they arrived, they were driven away. Philip was disappointed. Why did God let this happen? Jesus led him to a small well by the road where only a Samaritan woman was drawing water. He spoke with the woman, and soon her whole village came to believe in Him. Jesus turned to Philip. "You wanted a large field, but the Father wanted to save this one soul. Sometimes the bitter cup of failure leads you to an encounter that the Father has arranged. Learn to trust the guide, even when you cannot understand the map." 17. True peace is not the absence of storms, but the presence of God in the midst of the storm. Many mistake peace for a calm life without challenges. But the peace that Jesus gives is a deep trust, a firm anchor for the soul, helping us to stand firm even when the boat of life is violently tossed. On the boat in the middle of the lake, when the storm arose, the disciples saw Jesus remained calm. They asked in amazement, "Aren't you afraid?" He replied, "My peace does not depend on the calmness of the sea, but on my trust in the Father who commands the winds. You too do not seek a life without storms. Seek my presence in the storm. That is the meaning of being on the same boat with me, drinking from the same salty cup of the sea." 18. The worth of a soul is measured not by success, but by faithfulness. The world applauds the successful, those who achieve great results. But God looks at the heart. He treasures the quiet efforts, the persistent steps on the path of duty, even when no one sees and there are no immediate results. A sower returned weary and said to Jesus, "Rabbi, I sowed all day, but most of the seed fell on rocky ground and among thorns. I feel so useless." Jesus placed a hand on his shoulder. "Sower, the Father does not ask how much you have reaped, but whether you have sown with all your love. Your cup is not the cup of a bountiful harvest, but the cup of faithful hands scattering the seed. As for the rest, let the Father take care of it." 19. The most sincere prayers are often lifted up from the abyss of despair. It is when we feel weakest, most broken, that our prayers have the greatest power, because that is when we no longer rely on our own strength, but surrender completely to the power and mercy of God. At Lazarus's tomb, Martha said to Jesus, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." Her voice was filled with blame, but also contained a final shred of faith. Jesus, though he knew he would raise Lazarus, still wept. He said to his disciples, "A prayer born from this cup of tears is more precious than 1,000 prayers recited in times of comfort. For it rises from the deepest part of the human heart, and that is where the Father always listens." 20. Not everyone is called to drink a great cup of martyrdom, but every day we are invited to drink small sips from the cup of faithfulness. Many think that drinking the bitter cup is reserved for martyrs or great saints. But in fact, it happens in the small sacrifices, the quiet choices of daily life. Patience with a difficult person, forgiveness for someone who has hurt us, honesty when there is an opportunity to cheat. Mary, the sister of Lazarus, sat at the Lord's feet, while Martha was busy with preparations and complaining. Jesus did not rebuke Martha. He simply said, "Martha, Martha, you are worried and upset about many things, but the cup the Father wants you to drink is sometimes not about preparing a great feast, but about giving a guest a glass of cool water with a smile, about listening to someone's troubles with a patient heart. Greatness lies in small things done with great love." 21. The bitter cup makes the eyes of the soul clearer. The comforts and successes of life are sometimes like a fog, preventing us from seeing what is truly important: love, forgiveness, and eternal life. Suffering, on the other hand, has the ability to sweep away that fog, helping us to see the essence of things. A rich merchant named Barnabas lost all his possessions in a storm. He came to Jesus in despair. "I have lost everything," he cried. Jesus replied, "No, my friend, you have only lost what you could not keep. This bitter cup has taken away your wealth, but it has given you back your sight. For the first time, you can clearly see the value of family, of health, and of a peaceful soul. That is the true treasure." 22. Obedience is not blindness, but an act of trust in one who has a broader vision. When walking in a fog, we cannot see the path clearly, but we trust the guide. Likewise, when facing incomprehensible trials, obeying and drinking the cup the Lord gives is an act of placing our complete trust in the wisdom of God, who sees the whole picture of which we see only a small piece. The disciples asked Jesus why he insisted on going to Jerusalem despite knowing the dangers that awaited him. He replied, "The shepherd knows when to lead the sheep through the dark valley to reach the green pastures. To the sheep the valley is terrifying, but to the shepherd it is the only way. I am walking in obedience to the Father because I believe in the green pastures he has promised on the other side." 23. The bitter cup transforms theoretical knowledge into lived experience. You can read hundreds of books about the sea, but you will never understand its power until you actually set sail. Similarly, you can listen to many sermons about faith, but you will never truly possess it until your faith is tested in hardship. Nicodemus, a leader of the Jews, often came to Jesus at night to discuss theology. He was very knowledgeable. Once, Jesus said to him, "Nicodemus, you know much about God, but have you tasted him? The cup I am about to drink will be the final lesson. It will turn what is written in books into a truth written on the heart. Suffering is the language God uses to speak directly to the soul." 24. Renunciation is not loss, but an exchange. When we give up something for the Lord, we do not truly lose it. We are exchanging something finite and temporary for something infinite and eternal. We give him the cup of plain water of our small sacrifices, and he gives us back the cup of wine of the kingdom of heaven. A rich young man came to ask Jesus how to gain eternal life. When Jesus told him to sell all his possessions and follow him, he went away sad. Jesus watched him go and said to the disciples, "He thinks I am demanding a great loss from him, but in reality I am inviting him into a great exchange. He is clinging to bronze coins while I want to give him a treasure of gold. The cup of renunciation is always refilled with something more precious." 25. Gratitude is the key that turns a bitter cup into a holy chalice. Even in the worst circumstances, there is always something to be thankful for. Gratitude changes our perspective. Instead of focusing on what we have lost, we begin to see what we still have and what we can learn. It transforms the bitterness of trial into an offering to God. At the Last Supper, Jesus took the bread. He did not complain that it would become his broken body. He gave thanks. Then he took the cup of wine. He did not lament that it would become his shed blood. He also gave thanks. He taught the disciples the most important lesson. When you face your bitter cup, begin with the words, "Thank you." Thank you for being able to participate in the work of redemption. Thank you for being trusted. Gratitude will turn your cup of suffering into a holy Eucharist. 26. Every ending is a beginning in disguise. People often fear endings, the end of a phase, a relationship, a life. But in God's plan, the death of the wheat kernel is the beginning of the plant. Sunset is the beginning of a starry night. Drinking the bitter cup often means accepting an end, to make way for a new and better beginning. When they heard that John the Baptist had been beheaded, the disciples were deeply saddened and afraid. They saw it as a tragic end. Jesus said to them, "John's mission on earth has ended, but his cry in heaven has just begun. His death is not a closed door, but an open gate, urging us to move forward. My cup, too, will look like an end, but believe me, it is the beginning of all things." 27. God's silence is not absence, but trust. There are times during trials when we pray, and it seems there is no answer. Those are the most difficult moments, but that silence does not mean God has abandoned us. Sometimes it is the moment he trusts that the seed of faith he has sown is strong enough to root itself deeper in the darkness. In the Garden of Gethsemane, Jesus prayed, "Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me." But heaven and earth remained silent. He received no miraculous deliverance. He said to the sleepy Peter, "Peter, there are times when the Father seems silent. It is not because he does not hear, but because he is listening for the answer from within us. His silence is the space for our yes to be spoken freely and most powerfully." 28. The most courageous act of witness is to live in hope amidst adversity. The most eloquent sermon is not spoken words, but a life that radiates joy and hope even while carrying a heavy burden. When others see someone drinking a bitter cup with extraordinary peace, they will have to ask themselves, where does this person's strength come from? A Roman soldier named Marcus guarded Paul in prison. He saw Paul in chains, treated cruelly, yet night after night he heard Paul singing hymns. Marcus asked curiously, "How can you be joyful in this situation?" Paul, remembering the Lord's teaching, replied, "Because these chains can only bind my hands, not my soul. My master taught that when we drink the bitter cup with him, we also get a foretaste of the sweetness of the resurrection. My joy comes not from my circumstances, but from his companionship." 29. A personal bitter cup always has a redemptive value for the community. No suffering is entirely meaningless or purely individual. When we embrace trials with love and faith, our sacrifice creates an invisible source of grace that benefits others in ways we cannot imagine. A woman who had been suffering from a hemorrhage for many years courageously pushed through the crowd to touch Jesus' cloak. She had endured uncleanness and social isolation for years. After she was healed, a disciple asked, "Why did she have to suffer for so long?" Jesus replied, The bitter cup she drank with perseverance did not just heal her body today. Her faith, forged over those many years, will become a story that lights up hope for thousands of others later on. One person's pain can become the cure for many. 30. The final glory is not liberation from suffering, but permanent transformation through suffering. Heaven is not a place where we forget our scars. Heaven is where those scars become shining jewels, testaments to our love and faithfulness and to the transformative power of God. After his resurrection, Jesus showed the disciples the nail marks in his hands and the wound in his side. Thomas, after touching those wounds, exclaimed, "My Lord and my God!" Jesus said, "Thomas, I did not erase the marks of the bitter cup I drank. I keep them as an eternal testament that love is stronger than death, and light always triumphs over darkness. Your scars in this life are the same. One day they will no longer be signs of pain, but badges of glory." Before we continue with today's journey of discovery, we would greatly appreciate it if you could take a moment to leave a comment and share your feelings. If you found this content valuable, please don't forget to hit the share button to spread these positive vibes to your friends and family. And now, let's get back to the program. 31. The Lord's cup is often given when we are weakest, for his power is made perfect in human fragility. The world values strength, but God often works through weakness. It is when we realize we are helpless, when we have nothing left to rely on in ourselves, that we open our hearts for God's power to work most mightily. Andrew came to Jesus and confessed, "Master, I feel too weak and incompetent for this mission. My words are not as eloquent as Peter's, my intellect not as sharp as John's." Jesus picked up an oil lamp made of clay, cheap and fragile. He lit it and said, "Andrew, look. The value of this lamp is not in the clay it's made from, but in the flame it holds. The human body is as fragile as this clay lamp. The Father does not need proud golden vessels. He needs humble clay hearts willing to let his light shine through. Do not be afraid of your weakness, for it is through its cracks that the Father's light shines brightest." 32. Drinking the same bitter cup, but with a different heart, will lead to completely different outcomes. Circumstances do not determine our destiny, but how we respond to them does. The same trial can make one person bitter while making another holy. The difference lies in the attitude of the heart. As the crowd grew more hostile towards him, the disciples saw that Jesus remained calm. They asked, "How can you endure this injustice?" Jesus replied, "Soon 2 others will share the same cup of crucifixion with me. One will drink it with resentment and curses, and that cup will lead him to eternal death. The other will drink it with a repentant and trusting heart, and that cup will open for him the gates of the kingdom of heaven. The taste of the cup is not as important as the disposition of the one who drinks it." 33. Silence is not an escape, but a way to recharge in order to drink the bitter cup to the dregs. In a noisy world, silence is considered a waste, but for the soul, silence is nourishment. It is the time we withdraw from the external chaos to connect with the deep source of strength within, which is God. The disciples often saw Jesus seeking out a deserted place to pray, especially before major events. Peter asked, "Master, why do you need to do that? You are the source of strength." Jesus smiled, "Peter, even one who draws water needs to come to the well. I too need to be with the Father in silence, so my soul may be filled with his presence. Before drinking the bitter cup the world offers, I need to drink the cup of peace the Father gives. You too should not try to fight in your own strength. Seek silence to be filled." 34. Sometimes the greatest miracle is not that God takes the bitter cup away, but that he gives us the strength to drink it. We often pray for God to change our circumstances, but a deeper prayer is to ask God to change us within those circumstances. The strength to endure and a peaceful soul in the midst of a storm is a great miracle in itself. A man who had leprosy for many years prayed to be healed but was not. He came to Jesus in desperation. Jesus looked at him, did not heal him immediately, but sat down beside him, placed a hand on his leprous shoulders, and said, "You have prayed to be healed. But today the Father gives you an even greater gift, the grace to live with your illness in joy and hope. Carry this cup as a witness to the Father's love. And then in His time your body will also be healed." 35. Wisdom lies not only in courageously drinking the cup God gives, but also in discerning which cup comes from God and which is of our own making. Not all suffering in life is a cross sent by God. Some burdens stem from our own wrong choices, lack of wisdom, or sin. Discernment helps us to know when to persevere in suffering and when to courageously change. A man came to complain to Jesus about his impoverished life. Jesus listened, then asked, "The money you earned last week, did you use it to buy bread for your family or to gamble with dice?" The man lowered his head in shame. Jesus said gently, "The Father in heaven wants you to carry His cross, not the burden of mistakes you could have avoided. The cup God gives will purify you, but the cup you mix yourself with foolishness will only make you more bitter." Pray for the gift of discernment. 36. The cup of truth is often very bitter at first, but has the sweet aftertaste of freedom. People tend to avoid the truth about themselves and the world, but only the truth can set us free from illusions and chains. Facing the truth, however painful, is the first step toward healing. The Samaritan woman at the well tried to lie about her life, but Jesus gently brought forth the truth. "You have had 5 husbands, and the one you have now is not your husband." Those words must have stung her. But it was precisely in drinking that bitter cup of truth that her soul was open to receive the living water. He taught His disciples, "Do not be afraid to offer others the cup of truth in love. The initial bitterness will pass quickly, but the freedom it brings will last forever." 37. True obedience is tested when we do not understand the reason. It is easy to follow an order when we understand and agree with it, but the obedience of faith is shown when we still follow God's will, even when our reason objects and our heart is confused. It is an act of absolute trust. When Jesus spoke of His impending suffering and death, Peter rebuked Him. Jesus reprimanded him, "Get behind me, Satan. Your thoughts are not God's thoughts." Later, He explained to the disciples, "There will be times when I lead you down dark paths that you cannot understand. That is when you are invited to drink the cup of obedience. Do not try to understand everything, just trust in the one who is leading the way." 38. The essence of sin is trying to drink the cup of glory while refusing the cup of suffering. From Adam and Eve wanting to be like God without obedience, to the disciples vying for the highest positions, humanity has always been tempted to take a shortcut to glory. But God's way is the opposite. Glory comes only after the cross. When Satan tempted Jesus in the desert, He showed Him all the glory of the world and said, "All this I will give you, if you will bow down and worship me." Recounting this story, Jesus told His disciples, "The tempter always invites us to drink the easy cup of glory. It promises power and fame without sacrifice, but it is a poisoned cup. The cup the Father gives me, though bitter, leads to true life." 39. The deepest healing begins when we dare to show others our wounds. In a world that values perfection, we often hide our hurts and weaknesses. But it is precisely when we have the courage to be authentic in our brokenness that we create an opportunity for God's grace and the love of others to touch and heal us. A man haunted by a sin from his past did not dare to approach Jesus. He went to Him and asked, "What are you hiding in your heart?" The man broke down and confessed everything. Jesus said, "You have carried this cup of shame for too long. Today, by courageously bringing it into the light, you have allowed the Father's love to begin to cleanse it. Do not be ashamed of your wounds, for it is through them that you learn mercy." 40. When you cannot take the bitter cup from your brother's lips, the most loving act is to sit down and be present with them in silence. We often tend to offer advice and solutions when we see others suffering. But sometimes what they need is not an answer, but empathy, a shoulder to lean on. A silent, loving presence has a mysterious healing power. When Lazarus died, many came to console Martha with empty platitudes. But when Jesus arrived and saw Mary weeping, he did not preach. He simply wept with her. Later he said to his disciples, "When someone is drinking their cup of sorrow, do not try to explain its bitterness. Just sit beside them. Your presence will tell them you are not alone." And that is the most important message. 41. The closer we get to the light, the more clearly we see the dirt in our own souls. Many people mistakenly think that the holier they become, the better they will feel about themselves. But the reality is the opposite. The closer we get to God, who is absolute light, the more we recognize our flaws and our smallest sins. This cup of self-knowledge is very difficult to drink, but it is necessary for purification. Peter, after the miraculous catch of fish, fell at Jesus' knees and said, "Depart from me, Lord, for I am a sinful man." Jesus lifted him up and said, "Peter, you are right. But it is because you see this that you are worthy. Do not be afraid of the light." The bitter cup of recognizing one's own weakness is the first step to receiving the Father's infinite mercy. 42. The cup of trial has the effect of filtering out false relationships and strengthening true friendships. When life is easy, we have many friends. But when the storm hits, only those who truly love us remain. Trial is the fire that tests gold. It shows us who our true companions are on the way of the cross. When Jesus was arrested, the crowds that had cheered for him fled. Even his closest disciples ran away, leaving only a few courageous women and John at the foot of the cross. Later, the risen Jesus could say to them, "When I drank the bitterest cup, many left, but you remained. Your love has been tested in the fire. The cup of tribulation showed me which hearts were made of gold." Friendships built in suffering will last for eternity. 43. God does not call the qualified, He qualifies the called. We often look at our limited abilities and feel unworthy of the mission God gives us. But God does not look at what we have. He looks at what He can do through us. The cup of mission always comes with the cup of grace. Moses said he was slow of speech. Jeremiah said he was too young. The disciples were merely uneducated fishermen. Jesus told them, "The Father did not choose you because you are wise or strong. He chose you so that through your weakness the world would clearly see that this is the work of God and not of man." Do not look at the empty cup of your abilities. Look at the infinite wellspring of grace that the Father will pour into it. 44. The way we drink our bitter cup will be the most precious lesson of faith we leave for future generations. A person's legacy is not in the wealth or works they leave behind, but in their living example. The way a person faces illness, failure, or injustice with faith and hope will be a powerful inspiration, a sermon without words for those who come after. Jesus and his disciples saw a poor widow put 2 small coins into the temple treasury. He said, "This poor widow has put in everything she had to live on. She is drinking her cup of poverty with absolute trust. Centuries from now, people may forget the rich who put in their money today, but the story of these 2 coins will last forever." The way you endure your cup is the same. It will become a legacy of faith for many. 45. Haste is the enemy of the soul. The bitter cup needs to be drunk slowly and reflectively. In times of trial, we often want it to pass as quickly as possible. But many of the most valuable lessons can only be absorbed slowly. The patience to stay with the pain, to reflect and listen to God's voice within it, is a crucial part of the spiritual journey. When Lazarus was gravely ill, his sisters sent for Jesus, but he did not come immediately. He stayed where he was for 2 more days. Martha reproached him. Jesus could have explained, "Martha, some medicines need time to take effect. Some lessons require waiting to become clear. I did not rush so that through this waiting you would not just see a man healed, but you would see the resurrection from the dead, and your faith would be raised to a new level." 46. Every bitter cup accepted in love lessens the bitterness in someone else's cup. Our acts of sacrifice have a communal value. When we persevere in trials, when we forgive our enemies, we are contributing to the healing of the wounds of all humanity in a mysterious way. Our pain, when united with the pain of Christ, bears redemptive fruit. Simon of Cyrene was forced to help Jesus carry the cross. At first, he must have been very angry, but when he looked into Jesus' eyes and saw the gratitude there, perhaps he understood. Jesus might have whispered to him, "Simon, the cup you are helping me carry today, even for just a short distance, will make the cup of countless others in the future lighter." No act of love, however small, is ever forgotten. 47. Truth does not change depending on our feelings. In times of suffering, we can easily feel that God has abandoned us, that His promises are void, but feelings are just the weather of the soul. They change constantly. The truth of God's love and providence is the bedrock, unshakable. On the boat in the storm, the disciples felt they were about to die. Their emotion was panic, but the truth was that Jesus, the Lord of heaven and earth, was on the boat with them. Jesus said, "Why do you let your feelings drown your faith? The waves may be high, but the Father's love is higher. The cup of trial may frighten you, but never let your feelings define the truth about God." 48. God only gives us the grace to drink today's cup. One of the heaviest human burdens is worrying about the future and regretting the past. But God invites us to live fully in the present moment. His grace is given out day by day, like the manna in the desert. When teaching the disciples to pray, Jesus said, "Give us this day our daily bread." He explained further, the Father gave the people manna each day, just enough for one day. His grace is the same. Today's cup has enough grace for today. When you worry about tomorrow's cup, you are trying to drink it without the accompanying grace, and that is why it becomes unbearable. Live fully in today. 49. The greatest freedom is no longer needing the approval of the world. As long as we seek recognition and praise from others, we are controlled by them. Drinking the bitter cup often means going against the current, accepting misunderstanding and ridicule for living for the truth. True freedom is found when God's opinion is the only one that matters. The Pharisees criticized Jesus for eating with sinners. They lived to maintain a good image in the eyes of others. Jesus told his disciples they are imprisoned by the very praise they seek. My cup is the cup of truth, and the truth is often unpopular with the world. When you dare to drink this cup, you will be freed from the burden of pleasing everyone. You will have only one audience to please, the Father in heaven. 50. Ultimately, the bitter cup is just a comma in the eternal love story. When we are in the midst of suffering, it seems like everything, a long and endless chapter. But from the perspective of eternity, all the trials of this world, no matter how great, are but a fleeting moment. It is not the final chapter. The final chapter is always about love and abundant life. Before ascending to heaven, Jesus said to his sorrowful disciples, "You will still have to face many bitter cups. The world will make you weep and mourn. But take heart. I have overcome the world. Your sorrow will turn into joy. Like a woman in labor, she is in pain, but when the child is born, she forgets all her anguish. This earthly bitter cup is just the pain of childbirth. And the joy the Father has prepared for you is an eternal birth into his kingdom." 51. The bitter cup often increases the soul's thirst, and a thirsty soul is the most fertile ground for grace. When life is comfortable, we easily forget our deepest need, which is to be united with God. But when earthly sources of comfort run dry, Our spiritual thirst rises powerfully. It is that very thirst that draws us closer to God than anything else. On a hot summer day, while passing through an arid land, all the disciples cried out in thirst. Jesus said, "When you were by the lake, you rarely thought of water. But here in this desert, water is the only thing you crave. The soul is the same. The cup of trial that the Father allows is sometimes like a desert, not to destroy you, but to awaken in you a burning thirst, a thirst for God Himself. And to all who are thirsty, the Father will give them to drink their fill." 52. God's path is often not the shortest one, because His purpose is not just to get us to the destination, but to transform us on the journey. The human way of thinking always seeks efficiency and speed, but God's wisdom values the process. He often leads us on winding roads, through valleys and over mountains, because it is on that journey that we learn the necessary lessons. The disciples were surprised when Jesus decided to go through Samaria, a longer and more dangerous route. But it was there that He had the transformative encounter with the woman at Jacob's well. He later explained, "You want to get to the destination quickly. I want to stop by a soul that is a dry well. The cup the Father has given me is not a to-do list to be checked off, but a journey of love to be lived fully in every moment. Do not be impatient. Trust your guide." 53. True integrity is daring to drink the cup of truth even when no one is watching. Doing the right thing when others are watching is relatively easy. But a person's true character is revealed in their silent choices, in the internal battles that only God knows. That is when we prove that our love is genuine. Jesus told the parable of the prodigal son and highlighted the detail of the older brother still working in the field. He might have added to his disciples, "This older brother, though he later became jealous for many years, drank the cup of faithfulness in silence. He worked not to be praised by his father in front of everyone, but because it was his duty. You too will have bitter cups to drink alone in the darkness of your soul." Those are the moments when your faith becomes its purest. 54. God wastes no experience. Every broken piece of life can be used to build something new. We often see our failures, mistakes, and brokenness as useless things to be thrown away. But with God, there is no waste. He is the master artist who can use the most painful fragments of our lives to create a beautiful mosaic of grace. On a seashore, Jesus saw fishermen mending a torn net. He said to His disciples, "They do not throw the net away just because it is torn. They patiently mend it, knot by knot." Your lives are the same. There will be times when the net of your life is torn by failure or sin. Do not throw it away. Bring the torn pieces to the Father. The cup of brokenness, when placed in His hands, will become an opportunity for Him to reweave your life even stronger and more beautiful than before. 55. When we drink the bitter cup with steadfastness, we become spiritual fathers and mothers, birthing faith and hope in those who witness it. A person's sacrifice never affects only themselves. Your faithfulness in trial can become a lighthouse for someone else lost in the darkness, a source of strength for a soul on the verge of giving up. Jesus looked at His mother, Mary, who had silently endured so much gossip and pain since she conceived Him. He said to John, "Look at my mother." The cup she drank in silence for all those years became a crucible that nurtured and sustained my own faith. One person's faithfulness will always be a refuge for another. When you drink your cup, remember that you are not drinking for yourself alone, but you are conceiving and birthing faith for a whole generation. 56. The important question is not, "Why is this happening to me?" but "Who does God want me to become through this event?" The why question often leads us into a vicious cycle of bitterness and self-pity. But the what for question opens a door to growth and the search for meaning. It shifts the focus from the circumstance to the transformation of the soul. Job in the Old Testament spent most of his time asking why. But in the end, after encountering God, he fell silent. Jesus, speaking of the coming trials, taught his disciples, "Do not waste your energy trying to fully understand the reason for every bitter cup. Your reason is finite. Instead, pray, 'Father, through this cup, please mold me to be more like your Son. Make me more patient, more loving, more humble.'" That is a prayer that is never refused. 57. Rest is also a part of drinking the cup the Lord gives. In a culture that values busyness, rest is seen as laziness. But God rested on the seventh day. Rest is not just stopping work. It is an act of trust, acknowledging that the world keeps turning without our constant effort and that our strength comes from God. After a long day of preaching, the disciples still wanted to do more. Jesus said to them, "Come away by yourselves to a quiet place and get some rest." He explained, "A bowstring kept perpetually taut will break. A field tilled without rest will become barren. Drinking the cup of mission also includes knowing when to put it down to rest in the Father. Resting in trust is also an act of worship." 58. The bitter cup not only purifies the soul but also sanctifies the body. Many philosophies view the body as the prison of the soul, but the Christian faith teaches that the body is the temple of the Holy Spirit. Physical suffering, when united with the passion of Christ, becomes a sacred offering, and that very body will share in the resurrection. A leper who was healed knelt down to thank Jesus. He looked joyfully at his restored skin. Jesus said, "Your body was once a witness to suffering. Now it is a witness to the Father's power. Never despise the body. It is in this body that you feel pain, and it is also in a transformed body that you will feel glory. My body too will be broken to sanctify all the suffering bodies of humanity." 59. Truth hurts feelings, but falsehood hurts the soul. We often choose the comfort of sweet lies over the bitter cup of truth. But the truth, however hard to hear, always heals and liberates in the long run. Falsehood, on the other hand, is a slow-acting poison that destroys character and soul. When Peter denied the Master, he chose false security, but later, when Jesus' eyes met his, he had to face the bitter cup of truth about his own weakness. He could have said to Peter after the resurrection, "Peter, the cup of denial you mixed for yourself was more bitter than the one I drank, but your cup of repentant tears has cleansed it all. Never be afraid of the truth again, for I am the way, the truth, and the life." 60. Surrender is not a blind act, but a lucid one based on memory. We can trust and entrust our future to God not because we know what He will do, but because we remember what He has done. The history of salvation, both for humanity and for our own lives, is proof that He is always faithful. When facing the Red Sea, the Israelites panicked, but Moses reminded them of what God had done in Egypt. Jesus did the same with His disciples. When you face the coming cup of suffering, do not look at the raging wave in front of you. Look back. Remember the miracles, the healings, the teachings. The memory of the Father's faithfulness in the past is the firmest foundation for your trust in the present. 61. Do not compare your cup with someone else's. Each person is given a unique cup by God, perfectly measured for their own growth. Comparison leads only to pride when we see our cup as lighter, or to envy and bitterness when we see our cup as heavier. The mother of James and John asked for her sons to sit on either side of Jesus. The other 10 disciples were indignant, perhaps because they wanted those positions too. Jesus said, "You do not know what you are asking. Can you drink the cup I am going to drink?" He taught them, "Do not look at the cup of the person next to you. Focus on the cup that the Father has given you. Drink it with faithfulness and gratitude, for through it, the Father will complete His plan in you." 62. The greatest enemy in a trial is not the pain, but the whisper of despair that says the pain is meaningless. Satan cannot take away our pain, but he can take away its meaning. The greatest temptation is to believe that our sacrifice is useless, that God has abandoned us. Conquering despair is the decisive victory. In the Garden of Gethsemane, Jesus' agony reached its peak. It was not just the physical pain to come, but the weight of all human sin. He could have said to his disciples, "In this garden I am not fighting with swords. I am fighting the temptation to believe that this cup is in vain. Your greatest battles will also take place in your minds. When you hold fast to the belief that the Father has a purpose, even if you cannot see it, that is when you have already won." 63. Love does not exclude fear, but it moves through fear. Courage is not the absence of fear, but acting in spite of fear. Love for God and neighbor is the motivation that helps us to do things that fear itself wants to prevent. Peter, out of love for his master, drew his sword to fight in the garden. That act, though impulsive, came from love. Later, he became afraid and denied the master. The risen Jesus asked him 3 times, "Do you love me?" He wanted to teach. "Peter, the cup of mission you are about to drink will be full of frightening dangers, but do not focus on the fear. Focus on your love for me. That love will give you the strength to go anywhere." 64. Every bitter cup contains an invitation to conversion. A trial is never a neutral event. It always places us before a choice, either to become hardened and bitter or to become softer and more humble. Every difficulty is an opportunity to return to God more deeply. When people told Jesus about the Galileans whose blood Pilate had mingled with their sacrifices and the 18 who were killed when the Tower of Siloam fell, he did not discuss their fate. He said, "Unless you repent, you too will all perish." He wanted to teach, do not waste time analyzing someone else's bitter cup. Look at the bitter cup in your own life, whether large or small, and recognize in it the Father's invitation. Return, trust, let me transform you. 65. Freedom from things lies in the willingness to lose them. We are often enslaved by what we possess: wealth, reputation, relationships. We are afraid to lose them. But true freedom comes when we can hold everything with an open hand, ready to give it back to God whenever He asks. Jesus told His disciples, "Look at the birds of the air. Consider the lilies of the field." He taught them about freedom from anxiety. He could have added, "Where does this freedom come from?" It comes from knowing that everything belongs to the Father. The cup of loss is terrifying for those who think they are owners, but for those who know they are merely stewards, it is simply a matter of returning the property to its master. 66. Every time a person courageously drinks their cup, they add another link to the chain of grace, helping to pull those who come after them higher. We do not live our faith in a vacuum. We are part of a communion of saints that stretches across the ages. The faithfulness of the patriarchs, prophets, and martyrs is a heritage, an invisible source of strength that supports us. When speaking of His mission, Jesus often referred to the prophets who went before Him. He taught His disciples, "Do you think you are walking alone? You are walking on a path that Abraham, Moses, Elijah, and Jeremiah opened with their blood and tears. They drank the cup of their time so that you could stand firm in yours, and the cup you drink today will become a firm foundation for the disciples of many centuries to come." 67. Sometimes doing nothing is the most powerful act of faith. Human nature always wants to act, to control, to solve problems. But there are situations where the only thing we can do is wait and trust in God's providence. This active, trust-filled waiting is a profound form of prayer. When Lazarus died, Martha and Mary had done everything they could. Then all they could do was wait. Jesus, though far away, was also waiting for the Father's time. He teaches us that there is a time to act and a time to wait. To drink the cup of powerlessness when you have done your best and must now entrust everything to the Father is one of the hardest but most rewarding lessons for the soul. 68. Joy is not the destination after drinking the bitter cup. It can be a companion while drinking it. We often think of joy as a reward after the trial is over, but the joy that the Lord gives can coexist with pain. It is a deep joy that comes from knowing we are loved, that we are on the right path, and that we are participating in God's work. St. Paul would later write, "I rejoice in my sufferings." He learned this lesson from Jesus. Jesus, even on his way up to Jerusalem to suffer, had a deep joy in knowing he was doing the Father's will and bringing salvation to humanity. He taught, "I have told you this so that my joy may be in you and that your joy may be complete." This joy is not extinguished by the bitter cup. Rather, it is the light that illuminates the bitter cup from within. 69. True forgiveness is when we ask God to bless the very bitter cup that others have given us. Forgiveness is not just overlooking a fault. The highest level of forgiveness is turning the very hurt we have suffered into an opportunity to pray for the one who has hurt us. It is the act of turning a curse into a blessing, a divine act. On the cross, Jesus did not just say, "I forgive them." He prayed and said, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." He turned the cup of ultimate injustice into an intercession. He teaches us, when someone gives you a cup full of bitterness, do not just try to drink it. Lift it up before the Father and pray, "Father, sanctify this cup and pour out your grace upon the one who gave it to me." That is when you truly become like your Father in heaven. 70. The whole of life is a series of practice runs in drinking the cup the Lord gives, so that when the final cup of death comes, we can drink it not with fear, but with a complete fiat, yes. No one learns to surrender in a single day. Every small trial, every daily renunciation, every time we choose God's will over our own is a practice session. God trains us with small cups so that we will be ready for the final great cup. Simeon had spent his whole life waiting for the Messiah. When he held the infant Jesus in his arms, he could say, "Now, Master, you may let your servant go in peace." He was ready. Jesus, recounting this story, might have said to his disciples soon, Simeon spent his whole life practicing how to say yes. His cup was the cup of patient waiting. Your lives are the same. Every time you obey, every trial you overcome, you are training for your final departure, so that on that day you can drink your final cup not as a loser, but as an obedient child returning to the loving embrace of the Father. And so our journey of reflecting together on the 70 philosophies inspired by Jesus' teaching, "The cup I drink, you will also drink," has come to an end. This has been a long and profound journey, entering into the very depths of faith, hope, and love. Hopefully, through these reflections, the cup is no longer an image of fear or burden, but has become a loving invitation. An invitation to enter into intimate communion with God, to be transformed, sanctified, and supported by Him through all the ups and downs of life. The cup that each of us holds in our hands, whether it has the sweet taste of joy or the bitter taste of trial, can become a holy chalice if we offer it to the Lord with all trust, hope, and love. Because we never have to drink that bitter cup alone. The one who drank the cup of suffering to its dregs out of love for us is still walking with us every second of every minute, and He promises to turn every one of our tears into a precious gem in heaven. If these reflections have touched your soul and brought some peace, please give this video a like to support us. And if you are not yet a member of the Jesus and Me family, please hit the subscribe button and the notification bell, so we can continue to walk together on the journey of faith through audiobooks and deep meditations. And most importantly, we would love to hear your thoughts. Among the 70 philosophies, which one was a ray of light that shone upon the very cup you are holding in your hand? Please leave a comment below, share your story or a lesson from your own experience, so that we can support and learn from each other in this loving community. Jesus in me bids you farewell and prays that every moment of your life, whether sweet or bitter, may become a sanctuary of peace and grace. See you in the next programs.